All right, welcome back. All right, there's a church right up the street that is making international news. They're all over social media. Perhaps you've heard about it. It's Germantown Baptist Church. It's a very large church as far as their building, their structure, their grounds. It's a beautiful colonial church, humongous steeple, big building. You can't miss it. Many people that visit our studio will say, wow, you guys have some really big churches here in the South. Yes, we do. And we actually held a Worldview weekend in their fellowship hall that church co-sponsored with us probably, I want to say 15 years ago, probably 15 years around there. And but they're making news because apparently a lady was calling up churches in the South saying that she had a child that was without baby formula. She needed one jar or one can of baby formula, and could they help her? This is the video that was put out there going viral. I want to play it for you because the church is getting hated on big time. Here's the question. Does that church or any church have a biblical mandate, a clear-cut, direct biblical mandate to help the poor outside of the four walls of their church, meaning their actual New Testament fellowship members? The Bible is very clear that if you are someone that is without, your family should be helping you. If there is a widow, her family should help her first. But if she does not have a family, then the New Testament church is to step in. There are a lot of verses related to, well, there's one over in 1 John chapter 3. If anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and does not help him, that's a problem. Then God's love doesn't abide in him. If you see a fellow Christian in need, financially in need, I'm not talking about in need because they squandered their money, then they need to suffer consequences. So you have to define, what do you mean by need? Are they really in need? Or do they have enough income, they just squander it? That's different. And again, we have to distinguish between the poor in the Bible and what we call poor in America. I've written about this in many of my books, including the book Marxianity, where I go through in detail what the average poor person in America has. It doesn't meet the biblical mandate of the poor in the Bible, where someone doesn't have a place to lay their head or a coat. And oftentimes when we see about people in the Bible who are poor, you have to read the context. It's spiritually poor, like a spiritual beggar, spiritually poor, spiritually bankrupt. So we have to be very careful when we read a passage to say, is this talking about someone that is spiritually poor, spiritually bankrupt? Or is this speaking of someone that is without material necessities? And what are those necessities? Like literally has no place to lay their head or a coat. And when we do see oftentimes the poor mentioned, it is in the context of my brethren. If you see your brother in need. Matthew 25 is often read. You know the verse, very common. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was in prison, you visited me. I was naked, you clothed me, right? That verse, Matthew 25, is at the throne of the great judgment and dividing of the sheep and goats. It's at the end of the tribulation, and the Lord is judging the Gentile nations, and he's separating the sheep from the goats. And he says, you ministered to these, my brethren. Who are the brethren of Jesus? He was Jewish. He was Jewish. And what's going on in the tribulation? Many, many Jews are being persecuted, even by their own family members, because they have come to faith in Yeshua, our Messiah. The other Gentiles being murdered and persecuted as well. But he specifically says, you ministered to these, my brethren. Now, this isn't a basis by which they're saved. They're ministering to the Jewish brethren in the time of the tribulation isn't the root of their salvation. It's not what gets them saved. It's the fruit of their true conversion and salvation. So again, verses are used that are completely out of context. Matthew 25 is about a specific group of people at a specific time, particularly, again, people ministering to the Jews that are being persecuted relentlessly during the tribulation, who have come to Yeshua Messiah. And in some cases, they're being persecuted by their own family. That goes on today with many Jewish believers, right? So look at the context. If you see your brother in need, 1 John, the context again, a believer who sees a fellow believer in need. Now, does that mean that we're not to help people who are in financial need outside the body of the church? No, that is a matter of public freedom, Christian liberty. Absolutely. If someone were to call up and say, hey, we need a can of baby food, and we know your organization's in the Mid-South, we've seen you on social media, my response would be, well, do you go to church? Do you have a local New Testament church that you attend that you could call first? Because they should be helping you. Do you have family you can call first? Because the Bible says that a family member should be taking care of their own family. He who does not provide for his family spiritually and physically is worse than an unbeliever, an infidel. Do you not have family? And they won't help. Why won't they help? Okay, so do you not? If you don't have family, how about a New Testament church fellowship? Do you have a New Testament fellowship? Do you know of a group of believers that you fellowship with or are tied to here in the Mid-South that you could call? Okay, so you have no family, you have no New Testament fellowship, okay? Well, then, again, we might have an opportunity for evangelism, right? So now maybe we use this as a process for evangelism. Okay, so I'll tell you what. Why don't you give us your address? We'll get a couple cans. In fact, we'll get several cans of baby formula together. And is there anything else you need while we're at it? And maybe we'll add a few other items for you personally even. And we'll have it sent over by Uber. We can go to the store, grab some things, and have a carrier service. We have a carrier service here in the Mid-South. We use a courier, I should say. We use a courier at times to deliver things that are too far across town. We don't have time to do certain things and get caught in traffic. And by the time we spend time going there and coming back, it'd have been money well saved to just get a courier to go drop that off so we can keep doing what we're doing our broadcast, studying, preparing, etc., right? So we could call a courier up or call up an Uber and say, hey, take this several bags of groceries to this gal, would you please? And we would obviously want to include some gospel tracts, a Bible, and we might be prone to doing something like that, right? But we're not obligated. There's nothing, I cannot find one verse in the New Testament that says that I'm required to give money, to give groceries to someone outside of the church. That doesn't mean you can't. You have the Christian liberty to do that. And that can indeed be a good thing and a platform for the gospel. So please understand what it is I'm saying. Please understand what it is I'm not saying. I'm not saying it's wrong to do it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm saying it's a matter of Christian liberty. You ask a few questions and you determine that this is an okay thing to do. I don't ever give cash to anybody. We see people on the side of the road here in the Mid-South will work for food. Well, then why not go get a job? There are places hiring. There are several places we've seen recently with the signs out. Hiring, go get a job. They don't want to work. And many of them want cash so they can go and buy alcohol and other things. I wouldn't never give cash. But you can give a gift card. You can say, I tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to go up to the grocery store and we're going to put $50 on a gift card to the grocery store, which everybody knows what the big chain here in town is, multiple grocery stores, a Kroger. And we'll have that couriered over and you go and get what you need. We might do that, right? But there's no obligation. There's no scriptural mandate. I have to do this for anyone that calls simply because they ask. But I will say this. There is biblical mandate if I know of a fellow believer who is in need. And again, we have to understand what need means. We're not talking wants. We're not talking they don't have what they need because they squandered their check for the last 2 weeks or multiple months. No, you don't have a need. You have plenty. You just squander your money and now you're suffering the consequences. But if you find someone like a widow and she has children or she has been abandoned by a husband and she is no fault of her own and she is your neighbor or in your community and she may not even be a Christian, yes, I would reach out and help them. I would ask other Christians, hey, let's help them right now. They have a need and maybe we can use this as a bridge for the gospel, 100%. Now, if they're inside the fellowship of the New Testament church, meaning they're a Christian, and they don't go to a local New Testament church, they do go to a local New Testament church, and that church won't help them, then they need to find a different church. What's going on? Why would you not help her? If this is a legitimate person who is in need, their local church should help them. And I know people in the Mid-South who are single mothers. They've been abandoned. The husband's walked off, left with the mother with children. And the individual's working and trying their best, but falls short at times. And I know of a local New Testament church that steps in and helps this dear lady and her children. Amen. But if someone just calls up randomly to a church and says, we want help, there's no mandate that they have to do that. It's probably a good policy to seek and find a way to maybe help if you can. But there's no biblical mandate, but there is a biblical mandate to care for those inside your own fellowship, 100%. So hindsight is always easy, right? So this gal, as it turns out, apparently this was all a setup from what I'm understanding. That the recording of this baby in the background was a recording, right, Logan? Wasn't even a real baby crying. And there's indication this woman is not even what we would call, a Christian, right? By Christian biblical definition. Some are claiming that I think the pastor of Germantown Baptist Church on Sunday said, I think this was a setup. Maybe the people, what's that? She said she's pro-choice. Yeah. And maybe the people that answered the phone had an inkling, maybe their gut, maybe their discernment, maybe the Holy Spirit helped them see that something's not adding up here. But if they wanted to help, they could have gladly said, yeah, we'll tell you what, we'll courier over, we'll have Uber pick up some stuff, we'll pick up some stuff, grab it, call Uber to bring you something, and we're going to include some gospel tracts, and we'll hope you'll visit our church, and we can plug you into our church, into a Sunday school class, and any future needs can be met by the fact that you get involved in our church. We know what your situation, your background is. But people are dogging this church as though this church was obligated. But the church made it very clear, you know what, we have a benevolence fund, but it's for people inside our church. Now, the Bible talks about that. The Bible mandates that we as believers care for one another. You see this in the New Testament when the new church has just been formed in the book of Acts. You see that they are selling their possessions as people have need and helping them. Now, that's not socialism. I deal with that in several of my books. They're going house to house. The people in that New Testament fellowship, as this new church has been birthed on the day of Pentecost there in the book of Acts, they have their own homes and they're going house to house. They're not living in a commune, but they did have resources and they sold resources as there was a need. But this was voluntary. This isn't government forced. They sold resources as there were need among fellow believers, many of them who were coming in to be trained and to grow in their new faith. So yes, we see a biblical framework over and over for helping believers inside the confines of a New Testament church, New Testament fellowship, or people that we know are part of, quote, the church. Ecclesia called out once. So let's understand the people that are trashing this church, the church is at complete liberty to say, I'm sorry, we really don't have anything for that. Our benevolence fund is for our local people in our church. If you give all of the money that the church has in their budget for giving away food, assistance to the general community, you wouldn't have anything left to help the people inside your New Testament fellowship, which again, you're commanded to help them if they have no family that can do so. So this is look like a gigantic setup, and people are going off on this church that clearly do not understand what the scripture says. They will take scriptures out of context that are not being applied to the New Testament church today, like Matthew 25. Or if you see your brother in need. Now you say, well, what about James? Because James chapter 1, verse 27 says, pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unstained. Well, this is a book, the book of James, to the 12 tribes who are dispersed abroad. So again, it seems to be speaking about the widows and orphans among their own people. But again, no one is saying that you are obligated to give food, resources, money to any widow or orphan that just calls up. But we know for sure there are many biblical mandates for caring for the needy inside your own four walls of your New Testament church fellowship. So isn't it interesting how many are standing in judgment of this church without A, knowing the Bible, or B, knowing the background, and C, how do we know the people at the church weren't sensing a setup, which apparently that's what actually turned out to be. Watch this.
So I'm calling your church to test to see if they would help feed a starving baby. And right now I'm about to call Germantown Baptist Church located in Memphis, Tennessee. And we are going to see if they would be willing to feed a starving baby.
Thank you for calling Germantown Baptist Church. Please listen carefully as our menu options have changed. Press 1 for our address. Press 2 for worship service information. Or press 0 for the operator.
Germantown Baptist Church.
Hiya, I was wanting to see if you all could help with a small can of baby formula.
If we can help with what, I'm sorry.
Like a small can of baby formula.
Let me get the pastor on call for you. Let me place you on a hold. One moment, please.
Thank you for calling Germantown Baptist Church. Please listen carefully as our menu options have changed.
Thank you, ma'am. I saw you hung up, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to call her back. But my system was jammed up, so I couldn't see who was actually on call. And I'm like, what is going on? And it's not working. And I usually print that out, and I didn't this time, but I'm just gonna walk back there and see, okay?
Okay.
Okay, one moment.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, yes. I was just wanting to see if y'all were able to help with baby formula at all.
We unfortunately are not. We have a benevolence program, but it is for our members.
It's just for the members, because I have a 2-month-old and she hasn't ate since last night, so she's gone all night and all day without any formula. I don't need money or anything. I just need a small little can, and I've been calling everywhere and they're just telling me to call churches, and I just don't know what else to do.
Yeah, we don't have any formula here to give out. We don't have any kind of food bank or anything like that.
Would it be something y'all could get and I could pick it up?
What's that?
Would it be something you all would be able to get and I can pick it up?
Well, like I said, if it's anything like that, our benevolence is for our members.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. The guy is put in again in a tough position because the church has policies. And again, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback. And maybe, again, the thing would have been to ask more questions. But even then, the church has policies. They are entitled as a private church, as a private organization, to have their own policies that their deacons or their elders set, which, as he said, is a benevolence program for our own members. Now, again, maybe they sensed something was kind of odd, because there are plenty of social programs out here. And now we all know that people are filling up their grocery carts with soda pop and Coca-Cola and candy and all kinds of stuff with the SNAP program. We've seen that, right? So maybe something just wasn't sitting right. But all that aside, that's a church that has the right to set their own policy. And people somehow saying that they're being bad Christians because they don't have a can of baby formula to give. Well, they can make that judgment if they want, but this church is known for having done a lot of evangelistic events. They're a big church at one time that's gone down in size. I think they've actually had some of their own financial struggles from what I hear around the community because they have such a big facility and a big grounds, and the church has gone down in size. So, their budgets may be very tight. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I'm not a part of that New Testament fellowship, and they have every right to set their own policies and say, we want to save our resources for our own members. Now, again, we could say, well, wouldn't it have been better if he asked more questions and maybe he could have found a way to get her one can? But it turns out this was not even a legitimate situation. So people are condemning the church over what seemed to be a complete setup. I think that was the recording of a baby. So the lady isn't she involved in lying? Isn't she being deceitful? Isn't she playing gotcha? And she doesn't even know enough about the church to know that it's not in Memphis. This church is not in Memphis. It's in Germantown. So why is everyone making issue over the church that has every right to have their own policies for how they spend their money as a church, with their own benevolence program being for their own members, so they can know how are people living? Why are they in need? Why don't they have the money they need? Do they not have a job? Why don't they have a job? Where's the father of this child? Does the individual have family that can help out? Because again, the Bible says if you have someone, a widow that's in need, her family is responsible. Then if they don't help out, the New Testament fellowship can and should. There's a lot of questions to be asked here. And she's not even a part of the fellowship. But why are people not saying, wait a minute, lady, aren't you being dishonest? Aren't you playing got you? Aren't you deceiving them? And again, many people taking the scriptures out of context. Now I want to play a little clip on how the pastor responded on Sunday. Do we have that, Logan? The pastor, how he responded? Yeah, let's play that one, because I think he says the woman is a self-described pro-choice. Here's my book, Marxianity, from 2018. Look at this. This is coming from the census, the government's own census, Bureau of Census. This is what is the poor in America now, which I guarantee you most people don't know this. So we have to be very careful when we say, well, somebody's poor. What does that mean? In the Bible, it means, as I said, you don't have a place to lay your head or a coat. The poor in America, and this was from a few years ago, 43% of all poor households actually own their own homes. The average home owned by persons classified as poor by the Census Bureau is the 3-bedroom house with 1.5 baths, a garage, and a porch or patio. 80% of poor households have air conditioning. By contrast, in 1970, only 36% of the entire U.S. population enjoyed air conditioning. Only 6% of poor households are overcrowded. More than 2/3 have more than 2 rooms per person. The average poor American has more living space than the average individual living in Paris, London, Vienna, Athens, and other cities throughout Europe. These comparisons are to the average citizen in foreign countries, not to those classified as poor. Nearly 3/4 of poor households own a car. 31% own 2 or more cars. 97% of poor households have a color television. Over half own 2 or more color televisions. 78% have a VCR, a DVD player. 62% have cable or satellite TV reception. 89% own microwave ovens. More than half have a stereo. More than 1/3 have an automatic dishwasher. Of course, you could update those today. How many of them have cell phones? Here's the reality, too. Do you know how many phone calls some of these very, very large churches or even an average-sized church might get in a given week asking for a handout? Now, if they were to comply every time someone called, what do you think that would do in taking away funds for the people in need inside their own church? You see, there are a lot of questions that are not being asked, like I'm asking tonight. People are having an emotional response to this. Show me one verse, one, that mandates mandates Christians give their money to the unsaved outside the four walls of their church. One. Now, there are some verses that could be generalized, but I'm saying a clear-cut mandate. I'm not saying that you shouldn't help people and use it as a foundation for giving the gospel, a Bible, tracts, trying to get them plugged into your church. But folks, let's be very clear. Many people don't know what biblical Christianity is, and they think the job of Christians is simply to feed the poor. If you were to ask the average person criticizing this church, what is the Great Commission? Tell me, what is the gospel? They couldn't define the Great Commission. They couldn't define the gospel, but they want to criticize this church, which has every right, biblically and common sense-wise, to be careful and to say we have limited resources, and we need to be sure we're using our resources for our own church family members, as he described. Here's how the pastor responded on Sunday morning.
The video that has celebrated what is believed to be unrighteous behavior on our part is itself an unrighteous, fake attempt to set a trap for us and derail the ministry of GBC and steal our joy and steal our confidence as the people of God. We seek to walk in the light and walk in truth. The attempt to disparage GBC is neither light nor truth. The writer of Proverbs is known to personify wisdom as a person, but he also personifies folly. He says in chapter 9, verse 13, the woman folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing.
There you go. Now, someone say, what about the Good Samaritan? All right, let's go back to my book, Marxianity. Let me quote my friend Carl Tykrib. He says, the biblical parable of the Good Samaritan demonstrates true compassion, Luke 10. A Jewish man has been beaten, robbed, and left to die on the road. Various people pass him by, including religiously pious. However, a Samaritan traveler sees the individual, and although the Samaritan is culturally alienated from the beaten man, he recognizes the desperation and individually takes action. Individually, dressing his wounds, providing a place to rest and refuge, and the Samaritan pays for it himself without demanding remuneration or compensation either from the victim, his family or community, or from the government or ruling class. However, if the Samaritan were a supporter of the dominant theme in social justice, he would have acted with a different motive for different ends. The Samaritan would have used the occasion to lobby for social transformation. One, the robbers were really victims of an unjust economic system and had acted in a response to the oppression of the ruling class. In other words, the people that commit crimes do it because they're poor. If you set the right environment, they'd stop doing crime. That's the idea of basically man's a product of his environment versus all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, original sin. The humanist says we just set the right environment, people will be good. That man is basically good and a product of his environment. Set the right environment, people will do fine. That's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible in Jeremiah says the heart of man is deceitfully wicked above all else. Who can know it? So first of all, the issue would be, well, why did the robbers do it? Because they have not been treated fairly. There's economic disparity. Two, in order to bring justice to this oppressed class and to steer them back into a caring community, equality or equitable wealth distribution should take place. The rich must be taxed to fund necessary social programs. A more equitable society is needed. Three, who will pay the victims' medical bills? The community or the rich. Four, this tragic event, the Samaritan would tell us, is a graphic reminder of the class struggle. We're all victims of the unjust economic order. Therefore, we must be the violence of the voiceless. Therefore, we must be the voice of the voiceless and advocate for radical social change. In the social justice framework, there's another agenda that lurks behind it, the tragic. A political economic cause is a piggyback and leverage. the cause of economic inequality through wealth redistribution. This isn't about truly helping the victim. It's about using the victim. Biblical justice, on the other hand, never seeks to dismantle class structures. Evil actions are condemned, but this isn't specific to a particular social strata. Consider the words in Leviticus, you shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the persons of the mighty, but in righteousness shall you judge your neighbors. Mark W. Henderson said this about Ty Cribb's commentary. Biblical justice not only means that nobody is to be picked on because he's poor or favored because he is rich, but the contrary to the doctrine of social justice, nobody's to be picked on because he's rich or favored because he is poor. The fundamental error of today's social justice practitioners is their hostility to economic inequality per se. Social justice theory fails to distinguish between economic disparities that result from unjust deeds and those that are part of the natural order of things. All Christians oppose unjust deeds, but it isn't necessarily unjust for some people to be rich or richer than others. You see, the social justice warriors, they seem to want to love to pick on the churches. But there's no biblical mandate for the church. Now, individually, if you want to be a good Samaritan and do this individually, go right ahead. But there's no biblical mandate that says the New Testament church has to go around paying the medical bills, paying the grocery bills of unbelievers outside the church. Again, hear what I'm saying. Don't hear what you think I'm saying. If I see someone in need and I can help them, I'm prone to probably helping them. I have done that. I'm sure many of you have done that. But we do it because we want to be a good witness, salt and light. And if I can pick up someone's tab, and I did that not too long ago. I'll give you an example. I've not told this story publicly. It happened a few months ago. My wife and I were in a restaurant. And we went into the restaurant, and there were about 8 teenagers, maybe 7 or 8, probably 7 or 8, standing outside as we walked into this hamburger joint to grab a quick meal. Just literally going to get a hamburger and go. Now, we're gluten-free, both of us, so I think we were doing something like steak on a stick, a little bit of steak on a stick with some, I don't know what else went with it, but we're gluten-free. But we went into this joint, and there were these teenagers. They're probably maybe even early college. They were probably college age, because my wife and I commented, I think they're home from college. They were college students. We're pretty sure of that. And the place was crowded. And we walked in. I said, I hope the wait's not long. And they heard me, and they laughed and said, yeah, it's going to be quite a wait. And I said, well, let's hope not. Let's see. Let me see what I can do. And I was dressed like this. And so I walked in, and young people tend to, I don't know what it is, but a guy in this day and age wears a suit. But they tend to want to talk to you. They joke with you. They sometimes will ask you, what do you do for a living? Because so few people run around in a suit anymore, particularly, at night. And so anyway, they were joking with me a little bit. I joked back, and we got in right away. And we were sitting there when they walked by us to their table. And I said, how was the wait? And I laughed because we got right in. They were there before us. We got in before they did. And they made some joke back at us. And I said, well, I'm glad you got a table. And they walked by. Now, my wife and I ordered some cheese fries. And when we were waiting on our main meal to come by, I said to the waiter, send some cheese fries down to those kids. Tell them they're from my wife and I. And they did. And all of a sudden we hear this thank you, really loud, multiple thank yous coming. And we look down, it's from them. Yeah, great. Now, these people aren't in need. But here's the point I'm making. We are older adults. They were in their early 20s or college students. Okay? And we thought this would be a great gesture because they were being friendly to us. They were being respectful to us. We, as older adults, were engaging them in a friendly conversation. And they were very polite, very respectful, and good-hearted. And we just thought, that sends a good message to young people today that there are older people who are for them, right? That are out there for them. Go and live the American dream. Don't give up. There's an older generation. We've been down that road. Life is hard. Life is tough. We're all for you, right? And so it was just a way of saying from one generation to another, we appreciate you. And it went over huge. Later, they came over to the table and said, thank you. And we said, hey, it's our joy. We have kids older than you guys. And I know life can be tough. And you're working hard to get through your station in life. And we just wanted to bless you there. That, again, there's no biblical mandate to do that. And many of you have probably done something like that. And something far better when you see someone you know is a widow or has children and has been abandoned. So I'm not saying that we individually cannot do things and shouldn't do things for a platform of the gospel or to have a positive impact on people. But there is no biblical mandate that says these churches are to just start coughing up money left and right, the people outside the church. Or as I belabored the point, there will be no money for those who they are ordered to take care of, those inside their own New Testament fellowship. And as it turns out, perhaps this is exactly what the folks on the phone call thought, a setup. But Logan, this has gotten millions of views, hasn't it? Did someone tell me one of these has had like 4 million views? I think your mom said one of the accounts had like 4 million views of this. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's had a lot. But I wanted to address it tonight from the Bible. And that's what we've done. All right, guys, before we go tonight, don't forget, go to worldviewstore.com, order up the free business cards. They're free. It's a pack of free business cards. We'll send them out to you, okay? We'll send out these free business cards to you, and then you pass them out and say, hey, waiter, waitress, someone maybe you meet at a store, standing in line at the grocery store, maybe someone you know. Hey, check out this network. It's a free network. They're 24/7 on news. Watch them for 30 days. See if you're not better informed. worldviewstore.com. Thank you for ordering these. Hey, may God save America. Take care.